Hey scholars, so today we're going to jump into Unit 5, Lesson 24. This is going to wrap up our Unit 5 lessons on the fall of classical empires. So for your do now today, you're going to compare the impact of the fall of the Han Dynasty and the Roman Empire on religion. This is from our previous lesson, so let's review some of these impacts. The first is that religion provided a moral code and hope for citizens in the chaotic times following the fall of the empire. The second is this religion provided hope for a peaceful afterlife in the kingdom of heaven. The third, this religion gave hope for the ultimate peace in nirvana. And four, the leaders were viewed as equal with Christian leaders. So your job is going to be to determine if these apply to the fall of the Han Dynasty, the Roman Empire, or both. So go ahead and pause your video at this time and complete your do now. All right, let's see how you did. The first impact applies to both the fall of the Han Dynasty and the Roman Empire. The second applies to specifically the Roman Empire. The third applies to the Han Dynasty. And the fourth applies to the Roman Empire. So if you were not able to get that correct the first time, go ahead and pause the video and go back and correct that on your do now. And we'll move on to our objective. Our objective today is to compare the impact of the fall of the Han Dynasty and Roman Empire on social structure. So we're trying to find the similarities and differences on the influence of the collapse of the Han Dynasty and Roman empires on the social structure, which is the relationships between people organized by class and power. We've talked a lot about social class and social hierarchy over the course of this year. So what we're going to do next is we're going to look at how the social hierarchy was set up before the fall of the Han Dynasty and the Roman Empire. We're going to look at those pretty closely, and then we're going to see how that shifts after both of these monumental governments fall. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so the first social hierarchy we see on the left is the social classes under the Han Dynasty. At the very tip top, we have the emperor, followed by governors and kings, followed by nobles, scholars, and state officials, then peasants or farmers, then artisans and merchants, then soldiers, and then at the bottom, slaves. For the Roman hierarchy, at the very tip top, we have the Caesar or emperor, we have the imperial family, followed by the senators, then the equestrians. They're followed by the aristocrats and the magistrates, followed by the merchants, soldiers, and artisans, then by manual laborers, then by freed slaves, and as always, at the very bottom, we have our slaves. So, again, I want to remind you of this idea that social structure deals with the relationships between people. Specifically, they're usually organized by class and power, right? I want you to take a really close look at these hierarchies before you pause the video to answer your questions and ask yourself, how are these hierarchies similar? Which tiers are we seeing on both hierarchies, and how are they different? What things do the Romans have that the Han just don't, and vice versa? And remember, these are the hierarchies before the fall of these empires. We're going to see a pretty dramatic shift coming up in how the government looks after the fall. So go ahead and pause your video at this time. Complete your questions that correspond to your social hierarchies on your worksheet. All right, so this next image is a diagram of the feudal system. The system took hold with freemen after the fall of the Western Roman Empire in around 476 CE. Something that's important to note, when we see the word serf, you can interchange it with the word peasant. They mean the same thing. All right, but let's take a look at this new form of social system. At the very tip top, we have the king, then we have the nobles, then knights, and then at the very bottom, we have serfs. I want you to notice how the system works. The king grants land to the nobles. The nobles then grant land to the knights. The knights grant land to the serfs. In exchange for that, the serfs provide food and services when demanded to the knights. The knights provide protection and military service to the nobles. And then the nobles provide money and knights to the king. And the king, again, provides or grants land to the nobles, and it just keeps going on in a circle. All right. In this particular system, land is the absolute most valuable currency. There's nothing else that you get from this lesson today. I want you to understand that land, when we're dealing with feudalism, is the most important thing. These layers of power between the king, nobles, knights, and serfs, they're all dependent upon one another. The king has a lot of power, don't get me wrong. He has access to most of the land, so he has the access to the most valuable currency. However, the knights are completely dependent upon the services provided by the serfs, and the knights are providing services to the nobles, and so on. All of these things have to work together, or the feudal system will break apart. So go ahead and review this graphic for a little while longer if you need to, and pause your video and answer the questions that correspond on your worksheet. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our documents. Document A is an excerpt from an essay written by Wang Huixi in 340 CE. He was a government official during the Jin Dynasty. He's going to describe some of the shifts in the social structure. Towns are scattered. The emperor has given power to the nobles to keep order throughout the empire. These powerful families and wealthy households often take possession of public fields and rent them out at high rates to poor people. Mountains, lakes, rivers, and marshes are all completely under the control of rich families, and the common people are always charged a fee for gathering firewood and fishing. So there's quite a bit of information packed in a pretty tiny text. So let's review the main points. Again, this is discussing the social changes in the Jin Dynasty. Again, keep in mind the hierarchy we just looked at, it's pretty different, right? The towns have scattered and there's chaos everywhere. The wealthy have taken over all of the fields. They're forcing the poor to pay rent, and they're also forcing the poor to use public lands for basic things like gathering firewood and fishing. In this instance, the wealthy are absolutely at the top of the social structure. The poor are definitely at the bottom. And in this system, only the wealthy are really benefiting. So I want you to keep that in mind as you pause your video at this time, answer your questions concerning document A, and complete your central idea.